a couple of times already today. I'm John Sales, CEO of Foodbank, and thank you all for coming. What a great crowd. What a great series of talks we're having today. And I can tell by the big crowd that people are really interested in what Dr. David Just is going to talk about. Small changes, big bites. Promoting choice through behavioral economics. So if this is not where you want it to be, then we can go somewhere else. There are green sheets of paper on your chairs, probably on your laps now. We ask you to please fill those out after the presentation. We do read every single one of them. We do enter them into a database. We do crunch the numbers, and we do change what we do based on your feedback. So it's very important to us. We also share it with our presenters so they can get a feeling of how they did. Dr. David Just is a professor in the Charles H. Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management at Cornell University. He is director of the Cornell Center for Behavioral Economics and Child Nutrition Programs. He uses psychology and economics to find why we eat and what we can do about it, which I think that's probably a growing field. Yeah. And something, I think, we talked about this earlier, I think with the plenary speaker, talking about our brain chemistry and brain science and how what we choose to eat affects those. So now Dr. Just can tell us how we can trick our brains into eating the right foods. Hopefully. In his workshop, we'll learn about how we, as charitable food providers, can nudge healthier choices for the people, our neighbors, who are coming in to get food. David's award-winning research has been published in scores of research articles and was recognized in Discover magazine's list of top science stories. His work has been reported in numerous media outlets, NPR, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and is utilized by the Vermont Foodbank in our VT Fresh program, which I know a lot of you have experience with. So we are actually using Dr. Just's behavioral economic principles to design the kind of interventions that we've been promoting at the food shelves. And I'm really excited to hear about it. So, Dr. Just, thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a wonderful crowd. It's worth it all the way, to drive all the way from Ithaca just to see a crowd like this. I don't know when the last time, somebody mentioned an economist is coming to town, and usually when I have a crowd this large, it's the beginning of a class, and I just speak in math for a few hours, and I can get rid of people from my class and make life easier for myself. I won't do that today. Don't worry. What's the point? Well, just as backdrop, and I won't spend much time on it because I think you all know it. We are facing an obesity crisis in the U.S. We've seen a massive increase in obesity and overweight in the U.S. since the 70s, and it's particularly affecting children. The medical costs for this are really huge, and not only that, it's a particular problem among those who have the fewest resources, those who are poor. And in fact, if in one survey of children in low-income households, wow, we're bringing in the best. Yeah. I like it. I wonder if this is the thing. Yeah. I wonder if this is the thing that's causing the buzz. Can you still hear me if I just yell? No. Okay. That was that. Good enough. I'll deal with the buzz every now and then. That'll be fun. One survey of children from low-income families found that the average child does not eat a fruit within a week. Okay, that's pretty astounding, because that's really sort of the foundation for health and nutrition. And if they're not getting that as kids, they're not going to develop those habits later on. They develop the poor habits there. So what have we done about it? Well, our original responses were to, first, if people aren't eating the way they're supposed to be. It's got to be that we just haven't given them enough information. They've got to learn what it is that, that is good for them. And so we require labels like this to appear on every package that that is in the store, and it has a whole bunch of information on it. And that information is great. It's wonderful, and if you know how to use it, you can use it to pretty good effect. The problem is most people don't know how to use it, and even the people who look for it tend to use it in a way that's a bit perverse. So, for example, they'll look for things that are extremely low fat and completely ignore everything else about what added sugars there might be in the food or whatever else. And the results are sort of disheartening. I have a colleague who worked on the food guidelines, the dietary guidelines, and they had this great success with My Pyramid. Has everybody heard of My Pyramid? Yeah. He was involved in putting that together. It was this wonderful success, these great web tools, and I asked him, so what do you think it actually did? He said, well, I don't think it really changed what anybody did, but we got a lot of traffic. Okay? And that's the problem. It generates a lot of buzz, and people tend not to act on that information. It takes one more step. And sometimes we get frustrated enough that we react to that sort of non-response by saying, well, fine, we're going to try, New York tried this, we're going to try and just get rid of all soda on snacks. And we're going to get rid of the opportunity to buy things that are bad, because then everybody will buy things that are good. My favorite of these sorts of policies was San Francisco's banning of Happy Meals. Right, so you cannot actually sell a fast food meal together with a toy there. We had actually done some experiments on that. What we found was when you had the toy there.
Forgive me. I wonder if somebody could go next door and ask them to turn down their volume because it's practical.
Is it tough?
It's not fair. It's very loud. Pardon me for calling the question.
No problem. And I encourage questions, by the way. It's better if you've got feedback and interruptions. We were in our experiment with Happy Meals. What we found is when you have that toy there, kids eat about half as much. Why do they eat half as much? Well, about halfway through their meal, they get distracted by the toy and don't pay attention to the food anymore. So I don't know what it's doing to bring kids into McDonald's, but once they're there, it's helping them to sort of cut back on what it is that they were eating. So, anyway, why psychology and economics? Okay, there are a few different reasons. One, and probably the foremost, is because there's this real problem with what economists call endogeneity. In other words, the people who we'd really like to, encourage to change their behavior are exactly the ones who like the foods that are bad for them or dislike the foods that are good for them. They're also the ones that are most likely to push back, right? So, for example, calorie posters in restaurants in New York and in Seattle, they're required to post how many calories are there. All of the studies on this, aside from just a couple, have found that there's almost no impact on what people order, right? And one of the ones that actually did find an effect found that people who were on a diet consumed more calories when they had the calorie posters. So what's going on? Well, if you're on a diet and you're at a fast food restaurant, you've gone off your diet and you're looking to splurge. Okay? That's that endogeneity impact, right? So that's why that might not quite work. The other piece of this is reactance. Reactance is this natural inclination we have to sort of rebel against any threat to our freedom. Okay? So that means anytime somebody looks like they're going to threaten us in some way and take away our choice, we're going to push back. And by pushing back, that means whatever it is we're trying to push on people is not going to be as effective as if we could get them to choose it on their own. So that's what we really want to try to do. I'll push along just to make sure I'm keeping time. So let me give you a good example. I believe most people recognize this man. This is Mayor Bloomberg, former Mayor Bloomberg of New York City, who proposed that we should not be able to purchase sodas over 20 ounces at restaurants, at ballparks, and a few other places, though you can still get them at a 7-Eleven or at a grocery store. And what was people's reaction? Well, the reaction was, he's no fun, right? They pushed back on this to no end. People actually put on organized protests, bringing their kids out with big gulps, right? 64-ounce big gulps to say, don't touch our soda. Don't mess with our soda. And, you know, part of the reason why, well, what is he doing? He's taking this extremely narrow slice of soda consumption, because the overwhelming majority was in the grocery store. You know, you purchase it, you take it home. And he's going hardcore after this. And he's putting a target on people who eat or who buy soda in those venues. And they feel targeted, and they're pushing back, right? And in fact, we ran a nice little experiment to show this. We brought people in, and we would have them fill out some paperwork. And while they were filling out paperwork, we gave them a bottle of soda that they could drink. Okay? And what we found is, if we worked a picture of Bloomberg into that paperwork, they would drink about twice as much soda. And you might wonder to yourself, is this just an advertising effect? Has he associated himself so closely with soda that, you know, they now see Bloomberg and they think, oh, soda, yeah, I like those. No, that's not what's going on. Actually, we had them fill out a survey afterwards, and what we find is those who had seen Bloomberg were angry. They were pushing back. They didn't like the policy, and so they were drinking more, right? And if you're going to try and squeeze these people in this one little slice, well, they're going to account for that in the rest of their life, right? They're going to push back, and it erodes the effectiveness of this policy. Okay, so what's the flip side of this? The flip side is that choice can actually have added value. And let me give you an example. We had a great little experiment we ran. It was 4-H campers. Okay, brought 4-H campers in for lunch. And 4-H campers, the first group, it was about half of them, about 100 of them, we gave them carrots with their lunch. We said, here's some carrots, you can have these. Okay? And the other half, we said, would you like carrots or celery? Almost everybody chose carrots. Why? Because they're not celery, right? What was really interesting is, so when they took the carrots, okay, when they just had the carrots, we only had about 70% that ate the carrots. When they had a choice of celery, we had 90% eat carrots. Okay? In other words, more eat carrots when they have the choice of celery than when not. Why? Well, if this is what we call attribution. This is what we call attribution. What is it? Well, they have to, in order to choose between the carrots and celery, sit there and think to themselves, do I like carrots more than celery? To which the answer is almost universally yes. Okay? But now I chose this because I liked it. And when I sit down with my lunch, I remember I chose this because I liked it, and I have to sort of organize my whole life around that and to rationalize the fact that I chose these carrots. And so I eat it. Okay? That's what attribution is. Right? People are more satisfied with their choice if they have that choice. That's what it means. That's what it means. So, actually, you know, if we have any parents of young children here, this is something you can use to no end, by the way. Very, very simple simple example, and I'll probably come back to it. You know, so it's 8 o'clock, it's bedtime. You don't say, hey, it's 8 o'clock, it's time to go to bed. What you do is at 7:30, you say, hey, would you like to go to bed now? Or would you like to read for a half hour and then go to bed? Right? Then you don't have any fights on your hands. They go to bed happily a half hour later. Another reason people have a hard time with these sorts of interventions that we often use is because we are treating them as if they're fully rational. And the volume of food decisions we make is huge. When we've counted this, it's been between about 200 and 300 food decisions every day. With 200 to 300 decisions, you're not going to take any real time on one decision. You cannot put your mind into it. You can't really get into it to the point where you can deliberate and make sure you're eating exactly what you should. Instead, you're going to fall back on rules of thumb, on habit, on the things that you know, are around you that just sort of guide you, right? Social norms, things of that sort, okay? And what that means is, if we're going to change people's habits, we do have to speak to them about the nutrition information. We have to get that out there so they know it. But we also have to talk to people, or even just rearrange, how their environment interacts with them as they're making their food decisions. Okay? We have to learn to speak to a thoughtless consumer, one who is not engaged when they're making their food decisions. Because by and large, we aren't engaged when we are making our food decisions. Here's why. Okay? This is a typical grocery store. Typical grocery store, you look there and it looks like there are millions of items there. And it's only really just a few 100,000. Each one of these little packages has one of those nutrition labels on it. And we expect people to be able to sort through all this information and figure out what is the best thing to buy. Well, that's not the way people work. That's not possible, right? I think you spend your whole life, you couldn't quite do that. And if you're, you know, having to get to the store to pick up a few items in between soccer practices or whatever it might be, you're going to have to make a decision really quick. And if you're making that decision really quick, you're looking for any little bit of suggestion as to what it is you should choose. So if you're screaming out for that sort of suggestion, we can provide it. Here is, I can't read this, so if it's poor Spanish, don't tell me. But this is a sign that we used in one of our studies. We put these placards in the grocery carts, both facing the shopper and facing people away. We did a bunch of these experiments in grocery stores down in the Southwest, down around El Paso, Texas. Okay? We were particularly targeting Hispanic populations. What this says here, if you don't speak Spanish, like I don't, I think, at least I've been told, is you know, the average shopper in this store, goes down here, great. In this store, most people choose 5 produce items. That's useful. So I did remember to copy the English translation down here. I still don't know if that's what it says up there, though. Okay, good. So in any case, most people choose 5, right? And it says, it makes it clear that that's a good thing. Choose 5 fruits or vegetables, and it actually gives them some examples of what it is they can choose. Okay? And here you can see the pictures of what this looks like, and the actual produce section in this store is beautiful, right? This is a low-income area, right? But, okay, so there they have that. And what do you think happened? Well, what we ended up getting was something close to a 10% increase in purchases of fruits and vegetables. Okay? 10% increase just for having that little message there that made this sound like something positive. That was astounding, but not anywhere near as astounding as this. What is this? In the same stores, at different times, we would put an arrow on the ground. And this arrow would point towards the produce section. Okay, it was about 6 foot by 3 foot wide. And what we found from this study is that people tend to follow arrows. We again find this giant bump. Every time we would put this arrow on the ground, we'd get this huge bump in purchases. So, you know, the placards gave us about a 10% bump. These gave us about a 9% bump in produce sales. And this part might not mean much to you, but produce is a high margin item. And so if we're moving sales from one part of the store to produce, the stores like it. It's increasing their profit. And in fact, after showing this data to the stores where we ran this, they decided not only to keep it permanently in those stores, but to roll it out to their entire chain of 160 stores. Right? So this is something useful. Right? Okay. Let me give you a couple other good examples here. I want to watch my time. So I'll race through these. A couple good examples of how we sort of misjudge when we eat. We brought a whole bunch of people into an all-you-can-eat restaurant, pizza, okay? And we thought people might judge how much they decide to eat by trying to get their money's worth. We wanted to test for this effect. And so when we brought people in, we give half of them a coupon just to get a free drink, and half of them we gave a coupon for a free drink and 50% off their meal. Okay? And what we found is actually, yes, people who paid full price ate about one slice more, which ends up being several hundred calories more. But not only that, but the people who didn't like the pizza ate more than those who did. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, think about it. If you're eating to get your money's worth, right? It takes a lot more bad pizza to get your money's worth than it does good pizza. And so they end up eating a bit more. So this is just a little bit of evidence that we are, in fact, doing some strange things. Again, size. We see the size is, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, and let me actually play a little video for you, if I can get it to work. There's our mouse.
These college students don't know they are part of an experiment. Because we scheduled this around lunch, we serve a meal and measure out 8 ounces of pasta for everyone. But listen closely to what this professor tells them as he casually mentions how much they'll get. We'll be serving a double portion of pasta. A double portion of pasta? And the next group, we're going to give you a half portion of pasta. A half portion of pasta. And the next, full-size portion of pasta. A good meal is had by all. But then, everyone, we let them in on our little secret. We're sad, you guys. We're just part of a little experiment. Those who think they have regular portions, they ate it all up. Except for her. She says it was too cold. And the ones who believe they're eating the half-size portion, they quickly join the Clean Plate Club. I was looking for the other portions. Where's my other half? The students who think they have a double portion all left some food.
What you couldn't hear her say at the end was a double portion just sounded like more than I should eat, right? So you have to leave something on it. In other words, when we run this experiment, what we find, people leave more on their plates when we give it a large-sounding name. And why? Because they see how much they're getting, they feel how full they're getting, and still, the social norm of that name really means something to them. I'm not the type of person who eats a double portion, right? So I'm going to stop, right? Those things have an impact. In fact, here, it's about 140 calorie difference for having just a larger-sounding name. I'm going to skip ahead because I think I'm going to get behind, and I don't think that's quite as relevant. So, behavioral economics. This is where we actually get down to business. A whole bunch of different things impact our choices. Economists like to think about prices and people's actual, their enjoyment of the different items. But a lot of other things fall in here too, like our habits, how things look, what's guiding us at the time, what we even think is available, or whether we're even aware or trying to pay attention to what's available. All of those different things can impact what we're going to choose. And because those can impact what we're going to choose, that means how we design the choice environment itself can make a big difference, right? So we can use psychology, or we can use nudging to try and lead people to choose better things for themselves, things that are going to last longer, things that are going to be better for their household, things that are going to help them maintain their health, right? And what's nice here is usually these types of nudges are extremely inexpensive. If you go to a grocery store, you'll notice that there are nudges everywhere. You are in a highly, highly nudged environment. And why? Why? Because it's really cost effective for them. It's very, very cheap to put those in, and they get so much bang for their buck, okay? But the same principles apply in a food pantry, or in a school, or wherever else we may be looking. These are relatively effective and very inexpensive to put into place. And oftentimes, a lot of why they work is just because the consumers themselves don't even really recognize what's going on. That's not to say we're trying to take advantage of them. Right? You can reveal it to them and say, we did this, and it's really not going to have much of an impact on their behavior, but they're not angry about it, right? They're not showing that reactance because you didn't do anything to them to take away their choice. Okay? So, instead of eliminating options, which can lead to reactance, right, we can end up offering some alternative to them, and offering it in a way where they're naturally going to choose the thing that we would like them to. And maybe we don't get everybody. That's okay, right? That's a sacrifice you have to make, but you do get more. Right? So, in a school lunch setting, we've seen this over and over again. There are a whole bunch of schools that have gone to banning chocolate milk, right? And what are the kids' reactions to banning chocolate milk? Well, some of them decide that they're going to stop buying the lunch altogether. Some of them continue to buy, but pitch their white milk, and then when they get home, drink tons of chocolate milk, right? In other words, they push back, and while we hoped to get all this added sugar out of their diet, what we ended up doing was creating a bit of waste and a bit of backlash and defeating ourselves, right? And there's a more effective way to go about this, and that's really what I want to focus on. I'm going to mix a bunch of data from different environments, but within the food pantry, we face a lot of the same problems we do in schools. They're not exactly identical, but they're at least similar. You're dependent on donations for what you're able to put on the shelves, right? So you don't have complete control over what's going to be there. You have pretty slim budgets generally. You're sort of dependent on what can come in. Clients need things that are shelf-stable and things that are attractive, things that they know how to use, right? And really, nutrition is this key to their health. But how do we get them to choose those things that are going to be most nutritious for them? How can we guide them? We've got to find some way to do that that's going to meet these budget problems and still be effective, and not lead people to think that we're tricking them or manipulating them or taking away all the things that they like. Okay, so let's get down to business on the psychology of this. Food psychologists think we have really two mechanisms that make food choices, and choices in general. One is this, what we call a cold state. It makes these perfectly rational decisions, right? These wonderful decisions that balance off price and health and nutrition and long-term impacts, and just make the ideal decisions. And this is usually what all of our policies and all of our interventions are designed to access, are these people, okay? But other ways you might make a decision is what we call a hot state, which is more impulsive. Cheesecake looks good, I'll eat it. Okay, that's a hot state, right? It's just simply responding to the hedonic value, how it tastes. Is it going to make me full? Okay? And which of these prevails depends on how many cognitive resources you have. And what we've got are a whole bunch of studies that show that as soon as you get into food insecurity, as soon as you get into a place where you're short on cash, you face what's called a bandwidth tax that makes it so cold state's not available. We're dealing with hot state. So all the people coming in that you're dealing with, you're going to need to try and work with as if they're in a hot state. And it's not too far different from the way all of us are when we're hungry. Whenever we're hungry, we're distracted and we're making hot state decisions. And we tend to only eat when we're hungry, which is why we tend to make bad food decisions. Right? So this isn't too far different from what you would do anywhere else. If we're in that hot state, we're going to go for taste, convenience, and appearance. We're going to try for bigger and bigger portions. We're worried about, if we're going to the food pantry and our food stamps is already run out, we've got another week to go before we get more, we're going to load up on things whatever we can, because what happens if I run out? Okay? You're going to try and insure yourself against it. Okay? If you're in that cold state, then things are easy. You're going to worry about price. You're going to worry about some of the things about health and other things like that. But we're not dealing with that decision making. Okay? So we need to stop thinking about that. Let's see. A very good example of hot state versus cold state decision making. I told you hunger can sort of put us in this hot state, right? So we actually went to schools and we had kids, they had access to the same menus, but some kids were deciding on what they were going to eat at lunch early in the morning, First thing when they got there, they would select it on a smart board, and some others were deciding in line when they were hungry, and it was noisy. And what do you think you find? Those who were not, who did not pre-order, those who were in the hot state, 12% less likely to take a fruit. Okay, 12 percentage points less likely to take a fruit, 9 percentage points more likely to take snack food, and here's the big one, 25% more likely to take the starchy side. Okay, huge impact, right? Just by when we allow that choice, right? They wouldn't tell you we restricted them in any way. We just gave them the choice, and they're in a different state of mind. Okay, so let me see, what am I doing here? Let me try another video. Did I get that right? Okay, there we go. So this sort of shows you what our problem is in schools.
Cornell University have found that just by switching up the layout of a lunch line, you can make students eat healthier without them even knowing. So let's see if it works. Right now, the lunch line is set up the way it normally is. So we're going to track what the students choose with this layout. On this day, what do these teens want to eat the most? The bad stuff. They snapped up tacos, cookies, and sugary drinks, but the skim milk and the bean burrito were a tough sell. In fact, just 6% of the school got fruit and only 11% got vegetables. Based on my experience as a lunchman, these teens aren't even close to the government's goal of having half their diet be fruits and vegetables.
Okay, that's typical. Okay, those levels are very typical across the country. Very few kids take the fruit and vegetable of their own volition, and even those who do, it's a small percentage eating them. We've got, a lot of problems and a long ways to go with kids and getting them to eat healthier. Here is our contribution to the solution, right? This may not solve all the problems, but this makes a big step forward. These are what we call our 6 basic principles. And you'll get the chance to continue to see these, so you don't have to worry. These aren't going to go away anytime soon. Each one of these is just simply trying to find some simple way to manage what's going on around them, to try and influence what they eat. Very simple, low or no cost changes. And with those simple, low or no cost changes, we see big, big improvements. And let me, so yeah, you'll see those in a couple seconds, sorry. We'll come back. Let me show you what happened to those kids when we did that.
The masterminds behind the cafeteria redesign were Cornell University professors David Just and Brian Wansek. I wanted to know how they're going to basically trick teens into eating right. So what are we doing here?
The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a bunch of the milk, put it in front, so if a person's thirsty, at least they have the option to pick something up, and at least they have to reach over the white milk if they want to pick up a flavored sugared beverage.
Step 2. They took the pizza, which was the first thing in the lunch line, and moved it towards the back. And the veggies and the healthy bean burrito moved right to the front. Step 3, they renamed the healthy food.
We find that changing something as small as calling these mixed vegetables California blend to the Big Bed bean burritos.
Step 4, they moved the fruit from a plastic tub into a pretty fruit bowl. And finally, they took the cookies and put them just out of reach.
They're going to have to ask one of the food service workers to help pick it up. We think that's just enough of a barrier to keep some percentage of kids from saying, oh, whatever, I'll have lunch.
The professors rolled up their sleeves, made their changes, and now it's lunchtime. Oh, there she's getting her tray. She grabbed a sandwich. She's getting an Arizona iced tea, I think. An orange juice. Ah, and she got the cookie. So, Samantha, this time, you didn't get the cookie, and you got a piece of fruit instead. Oh, why'd you get the fruit this time? What do you think? I don't know. The sweet drinks were also harder to get to, and Jane, Marcy, Richie, and Levante fell right into our trap. Last time they grabbed Gatorade, Snapple, and Arizona iced tea, but this time...
But the water was just in front, so I just grabbed it.
Sales of sugary drinks plunged by 17%, while purchases of easy-to-reach milk soared 46%.
Whatever was easiest to reach, that was good enough for them, and that was enough to get them to change.
Another hit, the Big Bad Bean Burrito, sold out for the first time ever. On average, students' plates this time around contained about 18% fewer calories, and they made healthier choices.
Okay. It's a big takeaway. If there's anything you get from that entire video, what did she say when she was asked, why didn't you get the cookie this time? I don't know. No idea. I don't know. That's it. She didn't know. And even after you explained it to her, she was like, yeah, but that doesn't really affect me. Okay? What does it mean? It means that we can make these really big changes, and we find similar sorts of size effects wherever we go. We make those, and it took us about 20 minutes. We did it in between lunchtimes. It was very, very quick, and it cost almost nothing. That fruit bowl was about it. That was our expense. Okay? That's a nice slide. Okay, so let's talk about some of these principles. I'm going to try and go relatively fast, but I will refer you to our website. We don't have one that is specific for food pantries yet, although we're getting there. SmarterLunchrooms.org, all of these principles are listed there, and you can find all of this. So if I run out of time or I can't explain fully what one of these principles are, it is there. And if you have a hard time understanding it and you have questions about it, email us, and we'll be happy to talk and try to work with you on whatever it is you need. Okay? Which one of these looks bigger? Suppose this is a plate and this is your food, the black dot is your food. Which one has more food on it? It looks like the one on the left. They're exactly the same, right? In other words, people respond to the size of dishes and size of utensils that you use. And by putting out the proper types of utensils or serving spoons or whatever it might be, baskets that people are going to be taking, you can influence how much they decide to take, right? That means you can do that to enhance them, to get them to take more by making it look like they have more space for it, or you can try to get them to take less of some things by making it look like they're really big, right? Contrast also matters. So for example here, if we're looking at the size of this white area, right, it's a little bit more difficult to see the way this is projected, but again, those are exactly the same size. What we find is if we get people to try and put pasta with red sauce on a white plate, they dish out a lot more, they dish out a lot more when it's on a red plate than when it's on a white plate. When it's a white plate, there's the contrast, and it looks bigger to them, and they eat less. Okay? So that contrast can be used. If you want to make it look like you've got a lot of something, put some contrast between it and whatever you're setting it on. Right? Okay. So in fact, participants took almost 30% more when we ended up having them put white pasta on white plates rather than red pasta on white plates. Right? That contrast makes a difference. 30%. In general, we talk about this principle as managing portion sizes. Okay, and this can mean different things. If we're talking about a buffet line, it's, we don't want a quarter cup ladle in our mayonnaise vat. What we want is a little, butter knife that people can pull a little bit out of. Because if it looks like you're suggesting they should take a lot, they'll take a lot. Okay? And if it looks like it's normal to take these big amounts, if they've got larger plates, larger dishes, if they have a larger bag, if more of it is sitting there, they'll take more. Okay? If less of it is sitting out, they'll take less. That's what we mean by managing portion sizes. And in fact, taste doesn't even really matter. We've done this experiment with week-old popcorn. Okay? Week-old popcorn, you give them a larger bucket, they'll eat more of it. They'll tell you it tastes terrible, but they'll eat it all up. Okay? So size matters. Okay? Increasing convenience, and I think this one is just one of the biggest impact possible interventions you can have. Increasing convenience makes all the difference. So what do I mean by potentially increasing convenience? Well, consider this experiment that we had done. We took the secretaries in our office. You don't want to be a secretary in our office because we do things like this too. And some of them we would put a candy dish just right on their desk. Okay? And some of them we put a candy dish about 6 feet away from their desk. They eat about 3 times as much when it's on their desk than they do when it's 6 feet away. Right? Walking 6 feet, not a huge expense. But you're not going to do it over and over and over again, the same way you would just reach up here. Convenience makes a huge difference. Another example, ice cream cooler. If you go to, if you look at sales of ice cream, when the cooler door is open versus shut, okay, because it's a huge cost to open that door, you get about a 30% difference in how much people take of the ice cream when the door is shut versus open. Okay? Very small inconvenience, small barriers. If your fruit is behind a door that people have to open, you're creating some inconvenience. And that's going to have a cost for how much they decide to take. Okay? And let me see. This is a demonstration actually of the convenience factor in schools when we cut fruit. Right? A lot of children don't have front teeth. Older children have braces and things like that. Cutting the fruit, you can get a giant, giant impact. Again, it's actually about 27%, not quite 30, depending on where you are. Right? Okay, increasing convenience. This also has something to do with visibility. We had one lunchroom we went into where they had salad bar over here. People would enter the lunchroom here, go through the hot lunch line, and then separate out to cash registers. They would have to go all the way out over here to the salad bar and get back in line if they're going to take it. Nobody ever did. Okay? You move the salad bar here. Excuse me. Move the salad bar out here. Now, 2 lines naturally form right around the salad bar. They're bottlenecking there. They're sitting there. And while they're sitting there, it suddenly occurs to them, this salad looks good. And they take it. And you get about a 300% increase in salad takings by moving a salad bar 6 feet. Okay? Didn't take much expense or much hassle. Yeah, it doesn't look attractive, does it? It looks sort of shady, and it looks like it'd be sort of hard to reach, right? It's not particularly visible. It's down here, right? And you move that into a fruit basket that looks like this, right? And what do you get? You get literally 100% increase in taking of fruit. And like I said, we've verified that over and over and over again. Every school we've gone to, you can get that 100% increase just by making that fruit attractive and available, right? Huge impact. Okay? Visibility. Visibility makes a difference. And if we're talking about a food pantry, it's not just whether I can see it as I'm walking along, whether it's in the high shelves or the low shelves, but if you want something to be really, you really want to push it, it should be something that they can see wherever they are in the room and that they'll be attracted to, right? That visibility is going to make a big difference. The closer it is to the line of sight and the closer it is to what's convenient to grab, the more likely they are to take that. It's going to be a big impact. Okay. And I'll skip forward in the interest of time. So let me move on to the next principle, which is setting taste expectations. Here was a wonderful little experiment. We brought a whole bunch of people into a restaurant for a meal, and they all had exactly the same meal, but half of them, we presented them with fine wine from California. Okay? And the others, we changed the label. And so it's the same wine, but the label said fine wine from North Dakota. What do you think happened? Fine wine. People didn't like the North Dakota wine, but it wasn't just the wine. They didn't like the food either if they got the North Dakota wine, because you signaled to them, we don't care. We're just throwing slop out here on your plate so you can eat, right? And in fact, their evaluation of the taste of everything went down. They evaluated everything worse. When we set a low taste expectation, people realize that taste expectation. If it doesn't look like it's going to taste good, it's not going to taste good. Okay? And in fact, those who got the North Dakota wine said they would not come back to the restaurant much more often than those who got the California one. It doesn't matter that it was all free. In other words, if it looks delicious, they're much more likely to take it. Okay? They're much more likely to take it. Let me see if I can give you an example. These are two pictures, both from food pantries out in Oklahoma, and actually rather near where some of those tornadoes just touched us. What you see here is a whole bunch of boxes on the ground. And it's not only inconvenient because you have to bend down, but it just doesn't look nearly as attractive as that. Here what you have with all these shelves and everything sitting out, it's actually, believe it or not, exactly the same produce that was available in both places. One, it just looks so much more inviting, and people would take it. Okay? I want to get through my last two ideas. Suggestive selling. You're not really selling in a food pantry, but you can be suggestive, right? You can say, would you like to have this? Or you ought to try the rutabaga, it's great. Okay? By suggesting, people are much more likely to take it. You can get 70% increases in takings just by suggesting it, just bringing it to their mind and making them explicitly make a choice rather than just walk by. Okay? And I'm going to get to the last one. And the last one, this might not sound like it applies, right? Pricing strategies. You may not recognize it, but from the point of view of economists, you've got prices running all over the place in a food pantry because you have to choose between things. You can take one thing from this table, two things from this shelf, right? That means they're trading off one thing for another. And we have to be smart about how we do it. And let me give you a good example. We went to one food pantry, they had a table. You could take one item, and all the items on there, half the items were 6 bagels bundled together, and the other half were 6 donut holes bundled together. Okay? Now that's just probably a choice you don't want to give people. But, suppose you do, what can you do to help? Well, what we did is when we first sort of set it out, we just had all of the things sitting out, they could choose anything they wanted. What did we get? We got about 28%, actually 29% who were taking the donut holes, okay, instead of the bagels, which could have created several meals, right? Instead, if we just had 3 examples on the table, and the rest were sort of hidden behind, so it didn't look like we had a whole bunch of them, suddenly selection went way down, right? They had exactly the same choices available to them, and they knew they had the same choices available. They could even see the box behind. But we had suggested to them, you really want to take the bagels. And they did, right? And they were...
So you're saying you had a lot of donuts and just 3 bagels like everybody else had wanted the bagels?
No. So when we had a table first that had all of the bagels that were available sitting out and all of the donut holes. Then in the treatment, we had all of the bagels sitting out, and we would have maybe 3 of the bags of the donut holes. And if somebody took one, we replace it, right? So we just replace it all the way along. So it didn't look like we had a whole bunch sitting out, and it didn't suggest to them, we're expecting everybody to take the donut holes, right? It suggested to them, we're expecting a few of you to take donut holes, not a bunch, right? That made a difference. I am going to run overtime if I go any further, so I want to see if we have time. I want to save the rest of the time for questions, if people have them.
This is fascinating.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Yes?
When you were talking about putting the candy on the desk as opposed to 16 away and saying it was a matter of convenience, but isn't it also a matter of permission? Kind of like this, you know, what's on your desk? Of course you're supposed to. Everybody eats candy as opposed to, get up and we'll see you walking over the bed. Seriously.
I think, no, I understand. I think that's exactly right. I think there is this sort of social, yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah, it was, aren't you giving permission by putting the candy dish on the desk as well as giving it access?
And I think that's exactly right. I think that's the same thing that was going on with those donut bowls, right? We're sort of signaling a social acceptability of something. And it's giving them permission, but it's not giving them permission as in, you know, you're going to beat them over the head with a ruler. It's relying on their own vision of themselves and what they perceive themselves to be, and it uses that to give them permission. But I think you're right. Yep.
I just wanted to speak in support. Before coming here, I had just read a couple of Dr. Wansing's books, and I didn't know you were actually going to speak about this today. And I didn't know. I looked at it and I went, oh my God, I just read those books. I tried a couple of the suggestions in my kitchen, like putting the bowl out, other than the objection that I moved the knives, not inconvenient. But and I put away the crackers and the cereal and the things that we usually leave on the counters. And even though I read the book, I took the information, I made the changes, they work. I mean, it works. So I just want to say it actually, in terms of helping people eat better, it works.
Very good. Thank you.
Anything you dealt with culture, like cultural foods that someone's never eaten? How do you get me to eat something I've never heard of?
Yeah, that's actually a big problem, and I don't know that I can address it fully. One thing that we have sort of utilized, particularly if you're talking about a food pantry where they don't have client choice, they have to have sort of set baskets, is finding the smallest amount of choice that they can make, right? Something that is feasible. If this is your basket that has, no jalapenos in it, and this is the one that has jalapenos, right? And everything else is identical. Hispanic population, at least the ones that we were dealing with, are much more likely to choose this one and feel attached to this than they would otherwise. Is that getting people to try new things? No, it's sort of using what they're used to push your, what you want to have happen. Go ahead.
At our food shelf, when we get a vegetable that oftentimes we don't really recognize either, we make something with it and we serve it in small portions to them. And a lot of people are happily tasting something they've never had before, and we also supply a recipe for it. And so a lot of people will then take it.
And one way to sort of build on that idea, if you've got a recipe like that, you can make up just a few sort of sorted bags of all the ingredients for your dish, right? That's got included in it this vegetable or this fruit that is unfamiliar. But they're more likely to try it if they've got this recipe and I just grabbed this bag that has everything I need for it, right?
I'm wondering how you get people. I'm wondering how you get people invested in something or to value something that they're not actually paying for.
That's a good question. And it's tough because they are going to, no matter what, they are going to end up grabbing stuff maybe that they don't even intend to use as that insurance policy against running out. And I don't know that you really do want to adjust for that. But one thing we found that had a big impact on what they would select and how much they would select is displaying the price tags, right? And it worked in a really interesting way. We did this with bread, and it worked wonderfully. We got about a 20% bump in how much they took. And the really interesting thing about it is they weren't taking the expensive bread. They were taking the less expensive bread. They were almost sort of budgeting themselves or trying to find the bread that was more familiar to them. But you got to be a bit careful because this doesn't work with everything, right? And in fact, if you signal this is sort of a high-class item, this is something that's usually beyond your reach, most of them aren't going to take it because they don't feel like they should, right? And sort of feel guilty about it.
We have time for 2 more questions.
The psychology of giving people empowerment. That, like, if you take 6 people at random from this room and give one of them the opportunity to be the leader at that, and then put a plate of cookies on the table and see who there's one more cookie than there are people at the table.
Yeah.
The leader will wind up taking that last cookie.
I think that's right.
It's giving them the empowerment to be.
It's sort of more normal that shopping environment feels, the more they're going to end up acting the way they would in a normal shopping environment.
Right.
Okay, we got one last question.
Yeah.
It's not actually a question.
Which one's going to...
He just says stop. This is actually a response to the perceived value. We have a program that we do offering classes to people to learn how to cook and garden and whatnot. And our first year, our pilot year last year, it was only available to food pantry clients, and we would get like 2 to 5 clients at each class. And then this past year, we opened it up to the public in general. And we're now getting 15 to 20 attendees, and about half of them are food pantry clients. So we've bumped our food pantry attendance simply by taking away that stigma of it being free. That now it's something open to the public, and it's something that has value not just to clients but to the whole community. And RSVP is mandatory.
Great idea.
Yeah. Anyway.
So let's all say thank you.
Thank you.